Forgive me, I'm going to use notes because after dinner and that wonderful little drink I had, I think I forgot everything I was supposed to say. So I just wanted to say thank you and welcome here to be with me tonight. I really appreciate that. When Patty contacted me about speaking with you, I was excited to talk to you about an art genre that is steeped in tradition of a time past so many of us wish that we could step into, if even just for a moment. That feeling of a personal connection is what I try to bring to my artworks, something that you can feel and sense that it could be something you could actually touch. But first, thought I would talk a little bit about my humble beginnings. Ever so humble. Oh, that's already up there. And contrary to what my mother used to say, I was not born in a barn. I might have acted like it, but this picture to me says a lot about what my future would be in horses, Western life, and eventually painting. So I kind of think it's cute too. I wish I could remember that moment. So anyway, I'm going to see if I can work this little clicker here. Yeah, this doesn't make any sense until I tell you about it. I was about 7 years old in 1965. You do the math. I pretty much flunked on it. And it was Christmas, my family's favorite holiday. Besides decorating every inch of the house, my mother had an affinity for finding the biggest, most perfectly shaped Christmas tree she could fit in the house. Then my dad would use the old vacuum cleaner to spread a thick, heavy layer of white flock to mimic snow, while my brothers and I stood by hoping that fallout would happen to us in Brentwood, California, Northern California. So as you can see in the back of us there, that's my two brothers. The one in the middle is Ronnie. He is 2.5 years younger, and Mikey, who was a year younger than I. So I was the oldest. After my mom got finished decorating that tree, it looked exactly like the Wells Fargo bank tree, which she tried to mold it after every year. We always wanted a Charlie Brown tree. We never really got that Charlie Brown tree. But anyway, on Christmas Eve, we were all excited that our relatives would arrive the next morning to open presents. And oh, the entire living room floor was knee-deep in presents for everyone in the house, or everyone that was coming. Now, I wasn't always a play-by-the-rules kind of girl. Aided by Mikey and Ronnie, we would sneak into the living room before dawn to see what Santa might have left. More to the point, find out which ones were ours. Well, it wasn't hard finding the boys' presents. Front and center, an amazing pair of Schwinn bikes, complete with banana seats and high handlebars with fringe. Okay? They could barely contain their joy. I could barely contain my disappointment. Where was mine? So, after some looking, I did find a small box with my name on it, too small for anything important. I think this mic keeps cutting out here and there, not sure why. For anything important, I was sure, so I put it back without trying to loosen the tape to find out what was inside. I don't know if any of you did that before, but it's kind of a fun game with us kids. The next morning, there were the usual disturbances of family arriving. However, this year was different, as we kids were ordered to stay in our rooms until everyone arrived. You remember those days when you did what your father told you to do without question. I don't think that happens very often these days. For me, the wait was no problem, but I knew my brothers were anxious to get to those shiny new bikes. It was a very long morning for me. Everyone opening their packages, and I sat there and watched. At last, only one was left. So, all right, for me, the problem for waiting was no problem. I knew my brothers were very anxious to get those shiny new bikes. And my mom, however, could hardly wait to give me, at last, the final little present that was stuck in the tree, a little white box, of which I knew you couldn't get a bike into. So I tried to hide my despair. I'm going to switch this now if I do this correctly. That's kind of what I said at first. I opened it, and inside were 2 photos of a skinny, dirty, white cream-colored horse. "Oh, those are very nice pictures of Pinky," I said. Pinky was an old white stable horse that lived out his years in the comfort of the barn. "No, this isn't Pinky," she said. "This is your very own horse, and her name is Shiloh." I don't know where my mom came up with that name, but I think it had something to do with the Shiloh Ranch of a movie or series that was on at the time. I really do. I remember just staring at her, so aware everyone there was staring back at me, waiting for some response I didn't know how to give. Then she took me out back, where the very same horse in the pictures was standing, a 2-year-old cream-colored Appaloosa, and she was mine. Then she took me over to my dad, which was holding the horse, and he hoisted me up on the horse, and she danced around in protest, never having been ridden before. She was as terrified as I was, and my dad jerked me off, afraid the horse was going to kill me on the first 5 minutes that we met. So I didn't have a saddle for another year. I had to earn that. So Shiloh and I learned to stick together bareback. I also didn't have a bridle, but I did have a rope. And I learned to ride this mare with a rope in her mouth. And that was it, bareback. We really did learn to stick together. If I fell off, which I did many a time, she would stop dead still, right over me, and put her legs right over me, literally, to protect me. And I was too little to just jump back up on her, so I crawled up her leg, and she would stick her leg out like this. I mean, we were just best friends. She was an amazing mare. I had Shiloh for 11 years. We did a lot together. We chased a lot of cattle, jumped a lot of fences, and what we both knew we did best, race barrels and show and rodeo. We both really liked speed, and she was quick. Together, we won the 1976 Nationals at Cow Palace, California, with the best time in 22 racers. My show career with many horses was long, and my trophy room was full, all thanks to this mare. But the reason I told you this story, Shiloh was the beginning of my art career, though I didn't know it at the time. With a rope in her mouth and bareback, we rode to neighboring almond, peach, and walnut orchards, where I used the same rope to ride as to hobble her. While she roamed a few feet from me, I sat in the deep grass, drawing her from every angle. Many hours drawing that mare. I wish I had some of those pictures. I never stopped drawing the horses, riders, and cattle that I grew up with, not even on my math papers in school, where I was lucky to score a C for math with an A+ for margin art. That did not go very well with my dad. But looking back, he's quite proud of the margin work I do now. When I'm asked how long I've been an artist, I truly don't remember a time when I wasn't. I'm going to switch now to some paintings that I did as a very young kid. My grandmother was the artist in the family. She painted the California oceans that she lived by in oils. My mom preferred illustration art. I stood next to both of them, watching and learning. Because my grandmother painted the ocean, I too had to give it a try, but wasn't satisfied with just waves. I had to put a big moon in there and a wild horse with a golden unicorn or a giant seagull to take the whole center stage. That was my one try on the far right with the little boat in it, which was kind of fun to do, but not nearly as much fun. My first painting that I did in oils that I was really happy with, I was about 9. It was an 18 by 24 painting of 2 Arabian horses, bay Arabians, that kind of had their heads sort of locked in together. Their manes were all entangled. Wish I had a picture of it, but the truth is it probably looks better in my mind than it ever did in actuality. It's kind of like the big fish that got away. When I wasn't bothered by going to school, which I hated, I was on a horse or drawing and painting them. So, my mom is an amazing woman. She is the woman that is in the red dress next to me there. In those days, we dressed up for occasions. And it was not long before our show horse club got wind that I painted. So I think it had something to do with my mom, but for several years, I was allowed to paint the Breeders' Cup mares and stallions at the end of the show season. It might have also helped that I was also their elected club queen for 2 years. Maybe. These are also some early works. When I was about 14, looking back, maybe it wasn't too bad. Maybe a little off on some conformation. Maybe the eye was a little big on that paint. And this was done in pastels. I didn't really like the dust and how the pastel traveled on velour paper. And velour paper, if you don't know what it is, it's sort of a velvet paper. It's very, very fine, and it makes wonderful soft edges and easy to make layers on. I didn't know about layers at that time. This was straight out what I saw I just did in pastels. I learned about layers much, much later. Okay, so this one was this horse, his name is 3/4 Bars. It was an early 20 by 22 commission when I was about 16 years old, of a stallion whose presence made everyone stop and look. I had drawn so many renditions of him, but was especially captivated by his heavy neck and half-blue eye. It was my first experience to have a work published, and also the first time I felt I could be a real artist, whatever that was. Now, my dad was a hunter of all things four-legged, all things that flew, all of it. So I did a lot of paintings to please him as well. Just like I did the oceans for my grandmother, I ended up painting ducks, geese, deer, and a lot of dogs. So this is an Irish setter that belonged to a friend of my dad's, and it was one of the very first paintings. I stood back and I kept revisiting it as it was in my bedroom where I painted at the time, and I thought, that's not too bad. Not too bad. I suppose it would be fair to say that I've drawn and painted as many dogs as I have horses. It would also be fair to say that, as for me, I wanted nothing more than to create drawings and paintings for as long as I can remember. Some people just feel like they were born to create and born to paint images. I never thought of it that way, but looking back, I live and breathe it. I really, really do. I realized very young, as for the many portraits I had created, that few things brought more joy than a portrait or a loved horse or pet, and I seemed to have a deep feeling for bringing just the right twinkle to their eyes to bring them to life. Even now, I love to be in my studio because it's not just my happy place, it's where I live and breathe. My husband will tell you that. Still, it took years before I ever became aware there was a real way to make a living creating art. In 1994, I graduated here in Tucson at the Tucson Art Academy on Country Club Road. I don't know if it's still here. I think it is. I don't know. And that was for graphic design. No surprise, my favorite classes involved illustration. But like so many other artists today, I just knew that being a fine artist was simply not a real job. Computers were introduced in the last few months of my schooling, and for an entire school, we had 2. I managed to clock some 4 hours in total on the MacBox, of which intimidated everyone who even looked at the little thing. Turning it on and off was probably taking up the 4 hours that I clocked in, to tell you the truth. It was a very scary thing. We had no idea then how our brand new world of graphic design was about to change. In fact, rendering near everything we had learned moot. But that would take a few years, and in the interim, I created a business called The Graphic Connection. Like my mom, I'd always been a bit of an entrepreneur, and I liked working for myself. I enjoyed working with small companies and developing their business identity, which included creating a logo through their entire advertising presence. I don't know if anyone here might remember Ray's Ranch Market on Speedway that used to be there. I loved that store. They were my first client when I graduated from school. And it was a perfect match for me because of my illustrative interests. I would get a grocery list for them, essentially, and I would go to the store, load up my cart, take it to the register, tell them who I was, take everything home, and illustrate it. The cool thing is I got to keep most of the stuff, which was, pretty awesome at the time. Some other companies that I worked for that you might know here in town included Saguaro potato chips. They are no longer here. And also Tostino coffee and Sherry's prickly pear jams. It was a cool thing to go into grocery stores and see my labels on the grocery stores or airports or small gift shops, especially Sherry's prickly pear jams. It was tedious handwork to create printable labels then. Every color used had to be separated by cutting lithographs for each printing plate to fit together perfectly for a 4-color printer. Now everything is created using Photoshop or Illustrator, and just a whole different game. This is some of Sherry's stuff. No more worries to fix complex styles onto a 5 meg disc. It was easy to see then how graphic design was to change permanently. While I continued working for my regular clients, I also accepted a short-term job with Muscular Dystrophy Association up on Sunrise. I felt quite proud to be working with a company that reportedly worked so much helping children. There I stayed with them for 2 years and honed my computer skills. I learned a lot more. I didn't have any real computer skills at that point. And not long after, I was offered a job with Texas Instruments. And that's when my life changed completely. I hung on to a few clients for about a year just to make sure things would work out. Working with TI here in town was a bit of a dream. For me, for one thing, I made a regular paycheck, and I finally had some health insurance that was paid for. That was a big thing for me. I no longer had to work through long, tedious nights to make deadlines or wear so many hats, from bookkeeping to finding headspace to be creative. Like so many others, I just went to work and collaborated with a team of designers to create printed materials for an amazing company. I felt like the luckiest girl on the planet. I really did. More so because after about a year and a half, I had the honor to work a project with the business unit VP. I'd never met him, but I had noticed his graceful and confident walk across the campus. I asked about him. Nobody knew anything about him. Our meeting was difficult as I was instantly enamored with him. Embarrassed to say, but there it was. My design team was invited to celebrate with him after after a successful campaign where I sat with he and his boss at the dinner for the dinner at El Sol Casino. It caused quite a chatter with my design team when I was specifically invited to sit with Mr. David Jones and his boss for dessert. After David and I's fork bumped to grab the last bite of a shared dessert, I just knew he was the one. I called my girlfriend on the drive home and told her, I think I just met my future husband. I didn't see him again for another year, though. No one knew anything about his personal life. We just knew he traveled a lot for TI. But I somehow just knew he was the one, and I was going to wait. Finally, we had reason to meet again for work, and later for happy hour. We agreed to keep our growing relationship quiet at work so as not to cause unwanted gossip, and to make sure we were real. Something about Christmas, but it was on Christmas dinner for TI, and we arrived as a couple. We couldn't stop grinning from ear to ear, especially me. It took another 3 years before we flew our families to Maui and married in 2009. I think I have that date right this time. Yeah. I'm not very good with dates. I just paint. I'm an artist. So, I got myself confused here on talking about my guy. So, within a few short months, David and I left our jobs and decided to pursue our passions. He wanted to explore photography. His primary passion is astrophotography and wildlife. As for me, I would finally get to see what I could do as a full-time artist. My plan was to put together everything I'd learned from design concept to finished paintings. Sounded easy enough. My first works weren't that great. It had been a while since I'd painted, having worked a real job, especially on the computer. I re-explored pastel, color pencil, watercolor, acrylics. I wanted to completely immerse myself in art materials and genres. I especially love color, mixing mediums together like gold and silver foils and inks, giant brushes on huge canvases. I learned to combine tools such as palette knives, steel wool, and gessos for textures that fascinated me. It was very contemporary and truly fun for me. However, I was still missing something vital. I missed painting the West and all it meant to me. I enjoy long hours of fine detail. I want to see and feel the cut of leather, the expression in a horse's eye just as a rein is lifted. It was true. It was true. You paint what you know, and in my case, painting what I felt and lived all my life. So I drew countless pencil drawings to relearn my equine anatomy, of which is vitally important to me to get right. I had randomly posted a few on my Facebook page some 15 years ago and was taken aback at how many commissions I had earned. I sold 11 by 14s for $50. These are actually not from that far back. And I was very proud to do so, as it not only paid for my materials yet to come, I once felt the joy of a collector receiving it. As I got better at the drawings, I started in oils again, continuing to work on commissions of dogs and horses while taking a great deal of time to learn palette and color theory and just anything and everything I could learn from books and YouTube and just talking to people. The art world was finally opening up to me. Being self-taught has some valuable gifts, however, such as occurring to me to make color charts of live plants and real horsehair that I could put under various light forms to see how the values would change. Now, I'm going to go ahead and switch this over a little earlier. There we go. So that's one of my first attempts at a color palette and color charts. And I knew the plants would fade, so I would paint the exact colors of them next to them with information about the botanicals. I love botanicals as well. The thing is about learning things on your own is you get to own that information. No one told you how to do it. You discovered it on your own and it becomes yours. And nobody can take that away from you, and nobody can dissuade you about what is good and what isn't according to your personal eye. I'd always heard that having a teacher isn't always the best thing as a fledgling, because one can essentially be molded into beliefs and styles that are just not their own, and so they still have to go out and find who they are in art. Perhaps true, but it would have been nice to minimize the struggles I felt to the words, "Find who you are in your art." I feel I barely scratched the surface of possibilities of what is to come. My art seems to update with every work as I learn better. So perhaps I've always painted what I am and who I am. I have to go back to what I love most, which is color, lots of color. This was an oil painting in 2016, so it's been a while, and I do love color. As you can see by this painting, I really needed to learn to tone it down if I was going to be a Western art painter. So I do have to learn to do that. It's still something that I have to learn to do, and I'm working on it. So now I save all that bright color for Arizona landscapes and sunsets and that sort of thing, which I also love doing. Now, it turns out that David's professional abilities in photography comes in quite handy for my art. Not just for our photography opportunities of working horses, men and women, from Wyoming to Texas, but also to take professional photos of the finished oil paintings. The process for most of my work starts with hand-drawn images I'm inspired to from things that I see or imagine, such as landscapes or experiences with working cattle and horses, with emphasis on the story I'm inspired to tell. A feeling, really, of being a part of the scene as something caught in time, something you can actually feel like you can touch, like the finely tuned saddle or the magic of a moment. Some of these concepts I draw and paint right onto canvas from these ideas. Other stories I draw out as sort of a map for David and I to design a photo as close to the story as we can, the story being the strong point. An awesome photo, you'll often hear, doesn't necessarily make a great painting. All my photos go through intense scrutiny of design, and I always ignite the painting with my own sense of palette. I am especially interested in light and shadow. Is there anything more awesome than light coming through dust, leaving shadow and mystery? I use countless layers of oils on these paintings. And what I mean by that, in my earlier years, I learned to layer with thin layers of color. And in that thin layer of color, one color reacts with the color below it, and it will give a glow. It's just like when they paint cars, you know how they paint cars, and it looks like you can put your hand right through it. So I really try to get as much color without it being in your face as I can. And that's how I capture light, how I capture sunlight. In fact, the red blanket next to me is a good example of that, of the sun hitting behind him. It's intense, but not so intense that it takes away from the painting. And that particular painting is a great example of just so many layers of paint, thin layers of paint. Because creating Western imagery has always been my nature, I plan to continue to bring such works for as long as I am able. Someone here might recognize this painting. Someone here in the audience. I continue to explore within the Western genre. Lately, I've been very inspired by the young children who do their part in full on a working ranch. This is my first portrait of well, first I want to tell you about this. I think I'm at the right place to do that. This is done for Tom and Ann Wright, who were at the Cheyenne Rodeo. And they had taken a cell phone picture, which was an awesome picture of an amazing sunset. Very pink in color. And she brought it to me and said, I'd really like to have this as a painting. And I said, gosh, it's just beautiful. I would love to do that. That's the little picture in the center there. Imagine that on a cell phone, this big. And she says, I'd really like to have a big one, like a 48 by 72. Oh, well, okay, let me see what I can do with that. So I enlarged the horse considerably, changed the background a little bit where all the cowboys were in the picture, which was kind of a distraction, and put a lot of emphasis on the horse, the eye, which that's the first thing I look at. That's just me making sure that horse's eye was absolutely correct in his dissatisfaction for the rider kicking the hell out of him. A lot of flying mane and fringe and action in the whole thing. And you can tell the size of it by sitting next to her piano. So it was a challenge to do it from a cell phone pic, but hey, we got it done. So next, I think I'm gonna go one more. There we are. This is a young lady from the Hegeman Ranch in Wyoming who had a particular look of knowing she is doing exactly what she was born to do. A look of confidence and pride in her family heritage and the land that they work. I'm still working on this one. It's still wet on my easel. I'm still trying to capture that look, but I thought I would share it to you as an upcoming small series of about 4 or 5. One of the children being 5 years old or so, who has this grin on his face to die for. And there's just something amazing about how they are so young, 5 years old, sticking to the saddle, doing his job. And I've just got to do this. I just have to get this out of me to do this. So that is something I wanted to share with you. And the next one. So David and I were driving one time through Wyoming, and we were in a little town called Baggs, Wyoming. I don't know if anyone ever heard of Baggs. I'd heard of it because my dad and brothers would go up there and go hunting all the time. In fact, David and I went up there and met them for a hunting trip for antelope. So we were just happening to drive through, and ran across these people that were herding cattle, and I practically jumped out of the moving truck saying, stop, we got to take pictures of these cattle going through the river. You remember the river painting that was before this one? That was also part of this series. And here was this one man. He couldn't have been more classic as far as what you would expect as today's working cattleman. And the picture that David took is over to the left, and he complained bitterly. I wanted that picture, wanted him to do that, and I called it Good Memories. And he just complained, said, no cattle boy in their right mind would bend down to be looking at his halter like this. And I said, well, I'm trying to catch something here. And so he obliged me, and I got what I was looking for. The painting, which you can't see the detail here, was one of my very favorites. And as you can see too, I changed a lot. I added a ricotta there, and also a riata, and just really did a lot of details on that one. Unfortunately, it doesn't show that great hair. Okay, so that kind of wraps it up for the things that I have to show you. I'd like to close here by saying thank you to some of my collectors that are here and sharing your painting, and just thank you for coming and spending some time with me. It's been fun flubbing up a few things. Special thank you to MOC who continue to support me. Honestly, I wouldn't even be here doing this kind of work without MOC. Definite shout out to them. Another shout out to Dave and Rose Owens. They're not here tonight, unfortunately. They make my paintings look good. They do the framing, and I always say it's like diamonds on a black dress. No one frames better than them, at least in my humble opinion. This is a real honor, and I appreciate you being here. I hope you'll enjoy a few examples of my work that we brought. If you have any questions about it, my husband is right here, David, and I look forward to talking to you individually or whatever else. Thank you very, very much.
Will you take a question or two?
Oh, I'll try.
I'll start, and I don't know if anyone else has a question, but what are you inspired by other contemporary artists, or other Western artists, or other classical artists? Do you get inspiration from the works that you see?
I love all forms of artwork. From very contemporary, which I have some in my house, to the very traditional. I personally am inspired to paint traditional because I love detail. And I think, and I like to capture a story. What is that person thinking? Or what is he feeling? Or, how does that work? A lot of the contemporary art, and I'm talking the real contemporary, especially in Western, rather confuses me. I'm not, how shall I say? I don't understand it as well. It's very graphic design to me, which I've spent so many years with, and that's what it kind of feels like, is graphic. I still like a lot of it. So yes, there isn't a form of art that I don't like. I love Remington's work, for instance, and I've learned a lot from the masters just by. Does anyone visit the Bosch's art collection here at any time? Oh my God. I wish I'd learned about that collection a little sooner, but I went and saw it 2 weeks before they were closing it down, and I really regret that. My girlfriend and I went, and I learned some tricks. I almost hate to share, but they were things like, there were some artists that had taken like the color red, a bright red or a dull red, and blues, and they would just dab it in places, right in the perfect places that unless you look closely, you would never see it. And I thought, that ignites that painting. That just turns the light onto it. And so I've recently been adopting that exact same technique in my works. It's not something you're going to walk up to and see unless you're looking for it. But you might see a dab of cobalt blue in the shadow of a bush, for instance, or a bright red in just the outside of the shadow of a bush. And I love that. So for the first time in my life, I looked at some of these works and was incredibly inspired and just pulled as much as I could into my own works. So, yeah.
Thank you. Question back there?
Yeah.
No, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so, and Chuck, you may have to shift a little bit, but you talked about your saddle pad and the sunlight. Could you just talk about the other ones here that you have on display?
Absolutely. Well, I guess I'll start over here. I can walk a little bit with this. Prairie Hobble. These paintings, by the way, have been hanging in our house in Colorado because they work with our house. And I love these pieces. They're some of my favorites. The reason I love Prairie Hobble is layered. That's a photograph. I think you took that one, right, Sweet? In the background, there were other horses and riders, and maybe I should have put those in. But to me, the story was, here is this young man. Not that you would know he was a young man, since his hat is sort of covering his face. and he was having a little trouble putting the hobbles on this stubborn white mule. And the mule, by the way, was gorgeous, just beautiful. And I really tried to capture the look of that mule and his colors and everything about him. But what was amazing to me was the backlighting and the fact that the Wyoming fields that just went on forever. It was just, and in this one, in fact, I believe I did use some of the cobalts and reds that I was just talking about throughout the painting. It's extremely detailed. Some people like that, some don't. I'm inspired by it. I love the long hours of putting that kind of detail in. I live for it. I try really hard to loosen up, and it ends up looking like this. It just doesn't look right to me. I do try to get those edges, looser. But I want to see the veins in his hands. I mean, after all, it's right there. So you can see the tooling in the saddle and whatnot, and I happen to love that. This painting also is one of my favorites. I just like the light coming through. This face is actually the face of my husband's mother's husband, so Jeff. And I think he's a good-looking guy. He's perfect for my paintings, and I've used him a few times, in fact. Not a cowboy. He likes 57 Chevys, in fact. I'm working on a painting for him. But, so yeah, and the red roan, I do have an affinity for roans, especially to paint them, because they're not easy. I've seen many ways to paint them, dabbing color, and now you know me, I've got to put, lots of color in there. So there's going to be blues and reds and purples, everything in the color of that horse. And it tells quite the story. What's about the red blanket? Seems to be his favorite color and works for this new horse that he's about to get on for the first time. So the far one is called Stock Run. This guy, again, on a roan. He's on an Appaloosa roan, actually. The reason I love that painting is, especially these two, my strong attempts to loosen up that brush. They're both very loose. And I really do enjoy it. They're heavily layered, as I spoke about before. I believe Stockrun has some of the dabs of colors that I was talking about as well. But Stockrun is about a herd of horses that is on the move, catches the man off guard on his saddle. That horse, you can see his body really twisting. And if you know horses and you know your gear, you can look at that horse's face and you can look at the angle of the rein and you can see that that horse is responding to a quick tug and being surprised. You can see and feel the arch of that horse's body. That's what I love about that painting and why I've held it back. Ghost Chaser is, or Chasing Ghosts rather, I think it kind of speaks for itself. Get up close to it and look at the detail of the dirt that's flying behind that sorrel that's there in front. He's chasing ghosts, chasing a dream. Maybe he'll catch one and maybe he won't. Does that answer your question?
That's awesome, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Do you still ride?
Oh God, yes. Oh yeah. In fact, I don't own horses now. I was mentioning someone here that I brought a couple of horses down from Colorado. I think they hated me for it because it's so hot here. And I did sell them because I just couldn't get my footing with people, meeting people to go riding with and whatnot. But I still train horses. So I work with several horses here in the Tucson area, in fact.